So we spoke about waves. We spoke about waves in its entirety before reaching this point. Module 2 began with simple harmonic motion, then the properties of waves and going into interference, diffraction, superposition, and then we went into the lenses, right? We're going to come back to some concepts of rarefactions, right, and compressions as it relates to longitudinal waves as sound waves are longitudinal. I'm going to be using that with the air, right? But the eyes, we're going to be focusing more or less where we just left off in lenses, all right? So the physics of the eye, C-sec biotime, right? Because it's literally of simple biology, right? But we're gonna be looking at the physics of it more so, right? So we have a couple terms that we've looked at before, a couple years before. Let's try to revamp those terms. We must understand what the eye lenses are. We must understand what converging lenses are. What is the retina? What are the ciliary muscles, right? And what is accommodation, nearsightedness, and farsightedness. These things must be understood for the physics of the eye. So the human eye more or less uses converging lenses to focus light on, well, to form clear images on objects rather, right? So the eye lens changes shape to focus light on the retina, right? And the light sensitive part of the eye. So you guys should have remembered, okay, you have the pupil, right? Which are the pupil, then the lens, then through the sclera, you're going to end up on a specific point on the back of the eye where you have the retina, right? And the fovea and these different structures. C-sec you would have remembered, but probably cape you don't remember, right? But it's fine, right? We're just looking at the physics behind of it. Right, so the near objects, right? So you have to understand how the eye works for near objects and distant objects, right? And that brings us to the concept of accommodation, all right? So when an object is closer to you, right? So when an object is placed closer to the eye, the light rays coming form the image, well, from the image, right, of the object, or from the object rather, diverge a bit more. So to bring these rays into focus on the retina, the ciliary muscles will contract and make the lens more convex or thicker, right? And this increases the refractive power, right, and shortens the focal length. Remember that relationship, the power is equal to 1 over the focal length, right? So the eye itself would actually increase the power of the lens, right, by shortening the focal length and allowing for the rays to now converge on the retina. Right? For example, in this image on the top, right, we're seeing that the image is formed in front of the retina. So this image to a person would be blurry, right? But what we'll do is increase the power of the lens for it to refract a little bit more, right? To reach now on the retina itself, right? So the image to be formed here. So this would be the new image for an object that is so for an object that is not focused on the retina, right? So you're gonna end up with stuff like that, right? We're gonna be focusing on what's happening here really and truly, and I'm going to clarify it as it relates to objects at a distance and objects that are closer, right? But we're just looking at that. So we increase the power of the lens, we make the lens more convex, right? In order for the eye to focus on something that is near. As it relates to an object that is far now, right? We're looking at the fact that if the object is far away, then the light that reaches the eye is almost parallel with the eye, right? With the lens of the eye. So the ciliary muscles would now relax, making it less convex, making it more flat. And this decreases the refractive power of the lenses now and allows for the rays to now converge on the retina. Right? So an object that is close, ciliary muscles contract, increasing the refractive power of the lens, shortening the focal length, making the lens more convex. For distant objects, now the further it is away now, right, the more the ciliary muscles will relax, right, decreasing the not decreasing the refractive power of the eye by increasing its focal length, making the lens more flat, allowing for the parallel rays to now converge on the retina. right? So those are for the two types of objects, and this is all the function of accommodation, the process of adjusting the lens shape to focus on object at different distances. That is what we call accommodation. So the eye would continually adjust the focal length of the lens to ensure that light rays from the object at various distances focus on the retina specifically. All right. So when light is not focused on the retina is when we come up with when we have different defects, right? So myopia and hyperopia, right? And we use lenses now in combination with the lens of the eye to now fix, right, or focus correctly now the light entering the eye. All right. Does anybody here have hyperopia or myopia? Does anyone in this meeting have hyperopia or myopia? Nobody? So me alone blind? I'm me alone blind. Okay. Alright. So I'm the only one that wears glasses. Okay, go ahead. Oh, you have myopia or hyperopia. I don't know. You're nearsighted or farsighted. I don't know. Alright, so it is I alone that have this defect. Alright. Um well, my glasses is usually through as it was for astigmatism rather. Alright, well, let's look at this, alright? So lenses are commonly used to correct these different types of deficiencies, right? Well, defects rather. They're not deficiencies, defects. Right? So definition of the myopia, right? So the eye's focal length falls in front of the retina because the eye is too long or the cornea is too curved, right? So that's what's happening there. So for myopia, the image is formed in front of the retina, and so, right? So you have the retina here with the images formed in front of the retina, so the image is here. While for farsightedness now, we have the retina here, the retina R, but the image is actually formed behind. Alright? So that's what's happening. Falls behind the retina. So how do we correct these things now? For nearsightedness, we use diverging or concave lens. And for farsightedness, we use converging or convex lenses. So let's look at hyperopia. Sorry, myopia rather. For an eye with myopia, we can see now that the lenses, right, the lens in the eye, right, allows for the image to be formed in front of the retina. Now, so, are we following? You guys can use the thumbs up or the thumbs down. So you guys are following, right? So the image is formed there in front of the retina, right? So we not the lorem ipsum, that's crazy. But we use, right? What type of lens is this? Biconcave, right? And this is now diverging, right? So basically, what is happening is that the lenses are the rays of light are converging way before time to reach retina. So what we do is diverge it a little bit more, right? So space it out a little bit more. So when it converges directly on the retina. All right, exactly on the retina. So that's what we do. We apply this diverging. So it's diverging lens, right? Everybody's okay here? Okay here. Everybody okay? Alrighty. For hyperopia now, it's the opposite now. So the image, well, yeah, it is the opposite now. So the rays are taking too long, right? Or the rays are too long to the point that they actually converge behind the retina, right? So we use now a convex lens to allow it to converge at a shorter distance, so converge now directly on the retina. So it's some hyperopia or hypermetropia, right? Really and truly along the same regions of knowledge, right? So we're just looking at this, right? So this is how we correct these deficiencies, right? For cataracts now, cataracts really now speak to the fact that there's clouding on the natural lens of the eye, which leads to a reduction in visibility, in vision, right? So it blocks light from entering the eye. So nothing will be necessarily wrong with the lens per se, right? But there's clouding on the lens itself, right? So aging usually is a common cause of cataract. So as you get older, proteins may break down and clump together and create this cloudy filament. Go ahead, Daniel. Okay. So proteins in the lens itself start to break down and clump together to create that cloudy thing. All right. So other factors you can actually have genetic predisposition to cataracts. Could be due to eye injuries, prolonged exposure to UV light. So all who like watch TikTok until the break of dawn, it could be caused by diabetes as well, and long-term use of medications, and steroids and stuff like that can increase the rate at which proteins will break down there. Right? So all who love watch TikTok, and their glasses don't have UV protection because you have UV glasses, that can assist in that. Right? Because when I'm looking at my computer screen, I put on my glasses because it has UV protection as well. Right? So stuff like that is important, right? So the effects on the vision, you may have blurred vision, right? You can have halos around lights, right? So some persons would see a light source and see brief like lines around it, right? So you can see halos around the lights. You have fading colors now. So things that would be bright, vibrant, you might see a more washed out colors, and you may end up with double vision. All right. So usually we have surgical removal. So you have artificial intraocular lenses, right? So we can replace your lens, right? You can have lens implants right there, or you can have a monofocal lens, right? So you have different things that can fix it. You have monofocal lenses, right, which provide clear vision at one distance, right? And you have multifocal lenses, which creates clear distance at multiple areas, right? Reducing the need for glasses. So we can actually, so those are different type of lenses when we talk about intraocular lenses, right? So we can fix these issues by removing the lens itself by having a lens implant, right? So we could have stuff like that, all right? Astigmatism now, right? It is a refractive error caused by irregular curvature of the cornea or the lens, right? Resulting in a distorted or blurred vision. So instead of light focusing at a single point in the retina, it focuses at multiple points. So we end up having diffraction when light split up into multiple different rays. So it's split up now, right? It causes multiple regions now, right, of light within the eye. All right. So seeing stuff like that. So it can be caused by generally just an irregular corneal lens, right? Or genetics and eye injuries, right? So it could be genetics. Abnormalities, so you could have corneal or lenticular astigmatism, right? So looking at the lens, right, or the cornea. So the lens could be misshapen or the cornea could be misshapen. That's what we're talking about. Corneal astigmatism or lenticular astigmatism, right? The symptoms now we know it's blurry distance, right, or distorted vision at all distances, eye strains, headaches, and difficulty clearly seeing, and double vision and trouble seeing at night as well, right? So we have different types of astigmatism that we see here, right? So corneal would be irregular corneal shape. Lenticular would be irregular lens shape. Mixed astigmatism would be the combination of both. Regular astigmatism is the meridians of the cornea, right? So the it's not really the you know what? I don't think I need to get into all the biology because I was about to draw an entire diagram of what a cornea looks like, right? But we're just looking at astigmatism really and truly. The correction methods now, you can actually have cylindrical lenses, right, to correct light focusing. So glasses use cylindrical lenses, right, which is not in the scope of the syllabus. So we don't finish optics now, right? The CAPE syllabus done with optics, but really and truly when you do optics, you go into cylindrical lenses, you're going to concave and biconcave mirrors and stuff like that. But really and truly, this is where we end there. Right? We have contact lenses as well. So toric contact lenses to correct the shape. We have LASIK, right? So laser eye surgery, right? You also have ortho kertology. sorry, keratology, right? It's a special overnight contact lenses to reshape the cornea temporarily. So you have lenses that you actually put in at night, sleep with, and in the morning you take it out, right? And you know that something that you shouldn't do with the regular contact lenses, right? You shouldn't fall asleep with contact lenses in your eyes unless it's for that purpose specifically. You have surgery or you have the implant lenses, right? And that would actually now accommodate for the different bulges in the cornea of the lens for the light to now be refocused properly. All right. So that's really and truly that for the physics of the eye. Any questions or concerns before we move on to the physics of the air? Probably 10 minutes or so before we finish module 2. Alrighty. Any questions or concerns, Videsh, Christine, Hartiva, Kashima, Shanique, Danielle, are we okay? Those thumbs up were a lot of Videsh a while ago, but I don't see anybody else. Alright. I'm gonna just assume. Alright. Everybody else is fine. So the response of the air to incoming sound waves now. Right, so remember the air from CSET biology as well. Right, the human air is highly sensitive, right? So we detect sound waves, right? And we usually detect variations in frequency, which is pitch, and intensity, which is loudness. Right, we would have looked at frequency calculations and intensity calculations already. And we should remember that intensity or the amplitude, well, the intensity is directly proportional to the square of the amplitude, right? So hopefully we remember these things now. Okay? Right, so the pinna is the outer region of the air that we love to adorn with different trinkets. Right, and then we have the auditory canal. And then once sound waves actually are collected by the pinna and sent through the auditory canal, right, we end up vibrating the eardrum, right, which will cause vibrations in the malleus incus and the stapes, right? This now will vibrate fluid, right, in the semicircular canals, right, and that will create no pressure differences in the cochlea, right, and these now will be picked up, right, by the auditory nerve, right? And you also have a section of the eardrum or the middle ear, right, which is the Eustachian or Eustachian tube, right, which connects the ears to the nose and the throat, right? So we have that there. So we're looking at that. That should be more or less fine. For the sensitivity of the ear, now we know the human ear is capable of detecting vast ranges of sound intensities, right? So we have different amounts of intensities, usually from 1 kilohertz or around 5 kilohertz. We can actually figure out that mid-frequency range, right? So it's more sensitive to that range of sound. So it corresponds with human speech. So we see this is that kind of biological as well, because humans have evolved, right, to be more sensitive to frequencies within human speech. So we can recognize human speech, right, or frequencies within that range of human speech more so than every other sound. All right. So looking at that. So low frequencies now are around on less than 20 hertz, right? The ear is less sensitive to that, right? And we tend to hear these infrasonic sounds, right? So these frequencies are typically below the range of human hearing. Then the middle frequency is 20 to around 20 kilohertz, right? Which is audible for most humans, right? And the greatest sensitivity, as we said, is 1 kilohertz to 5 kilohertz, right? But high frequency sounds is now above 20 kilohertz. This is now what we call ultrasonic, right? Which are generally beyond the range of human hearing. Though some individuals, especially young people, may still detect sounds up to 20 kilohertz. So usually as we get older now, our sensitivity of hearing goes down. All right. So the ear sensitivity can be determined by the structure of the pinna, all right, which funnels the sound into the ear. The ossicles in the middle ear would actually amplify the sounds, right? So the sound wave specifically, right? And then the cochlea now, right, will actually convert those pressure differences in the liquid into electrical signals, which will now be picked up by the auditory nerve. Any questions or concerns before we move on? Any issues? Alrighty. The frequency response to the ear. Now, this is just a diagram of the cochlea there. All right. So with the frequencies now, I think we spoke about this. I mean, we spoke about it a little bit before, right? So at different regions within the cochlea, we're gonna have different frequencies being picked up, right? So we're just saying that the frequency responses are not uniform. For our ears, more sensitive, it's actually sensitive to more certain frequencies and less sensitive to others, as we discussed before. All right. So I wanted to drive home the point that we are more sensitive to different sounds than others, right? And I think you guys may have experiences before where you played a YouTube video or something that has a sound of increasing frequency and you try to see which person can hear the largest range of frequency. I think you guys should probably try that out to see which range you complete at or which range you can no longer hear at. Alright, that's an interesting thing to do. Alright. So the intensity of sound and the ear's response. So these are really and truly okay. So loudness, right? So loudness is measured in decibels, right? So common D and a capital B, right? So decibels, and the ear's response intensity follows a logarithmic scale, right? So the intense how we perceive loudness is very much logarithmic to the base 10, right? So the math comes back in as well. Right, so we end up looking at the fact that the ear is actually capable of detecting an incredibly wide range of intensities, right? From very faint sounds, right, to very large sounds, right? And then we have to look at the threshold of hearing itself. So the quietest sound on average that a human ear can detect is around 0 decibels at the sound pressure level, corresponding to the sound of about 20 times 10 to the negative 620, right? Right, times 10, right? So we're looking at that. So that this pascals, right, at 1 kilohertz, right? So 20 times 10 to the negative 6, actually, right? So I think this is mixed up, right? So it's 20 times the pascals at 1 kilohertz. So I think I need to redo this. It actually should be 20 times 10 to the negative 6. Right, which says it's 20 times pascals at that. All right, so I need to fix this before I send it out. Please remind me. Right, but the threshold of pain now, the level of sound intensity that causes discomfort or pain is typically around 120 decibels, right, which is approximately the intensity of a jet engine taking off. Right, so we have to understand these things. So threshold of hearing, threshold of pain, right, and how loudness is perceived in decibels, and our perception of intensity or loudness is logarithmic. Right. So let's look at this. The intensity level in decibels now. The general relationship for the intensity level in decibels is given by a decibel is equal to 10 times the log to the base 10 of I, which is the intensity of the sound being measured, divided by I naught, which is a reference intensity or the threshold intensity, which is typically, right, taken to be the smallest sound intensity that an average human can detect. All right, which I naught tends to be 1 times 10 to the negative 12 watts per meter squared. All right, so looking at that, watts per meter squared. So that is what we measure it in, the intensity in. All right. So watts are measured in, intensity is measured in watts per meter squared. Alrighty. So we're looking at that. So 10 times 10 to the base 10, 10 times log to the base 10 of the I over I naught. Intensity of the sound divided by the threshold intensity. Alright, that is the equation that we're looking at there. Hopefully you guys started your formula sheets. So as you go through a topic, you write down the formulas and the equations and stuff and what each verb means. So you have that formula sheet to work with when you're studying and revising. Alrighty. The decibel scale now. So decibel scale, as we said before, is logarithmic, right? Meaning that each 10 decibel increase represents a 10-fold increase in sound intensity. So the scale is used because the human ear perceives sound intensity logarithmically rather than linearly. For example, an increase of 20 decibels corresponds with an intensity increase of 100 times, right? And 40 decibels is 1,000 times the original intensity. All right. So looking at that, so 0 decibels is the threshold of hearing there, right? So you can't really hear anything below the 0 decibels. So typical noises are between 0 decibels to around 40 decibels, right? So quiet bedroom or quiet office there, right? From 40 to around 70 decibels, that's no speech, right? Normal conversations, right? Around 70 to around 100 decibels now, right? When your neighbor feels like to cut the lawn in the early morning on a Sunday, you don't want to get up and you hear that annoying grating sound. It's somewhere around there. Or when there's construction next door. Right? But 100 to around 140 now is definitely, right, an issue. Right? When you start, for example, a chainsaw or load trucks or something like that, so around that there. So the upper threshold of pain is the 140 decibels, while the threshold of hearing itself is 0 decibels. So around 0 decibels to 100 decibel is what we're supposed to be listening to. So as we keep on increasing the amount of decibels that the headphones, right, can produce and listening to loud music constantly, that will affect our hearing, right? But I don't think that headphones would pass into, dangerous territories of sound, right? So because remember that everything that we do in physics have an ethical counterpart to it. So I don't think your headphones can destroy your hearing like that. But over a period of time being now sensitized to things around 100 decibels, 110 decibels, your hearing quality will decrease over time. Right? So noise now. So these are now actually personal, right? So some persons will see things as noise while some persons see things as rhythm, right? But noise is subjective to determine the sounds unwanted, displeasing, or disturbing now. So noise has different characteristics of irregular. So noise typically has no clear pattern, rhythm, or tone, right? So it tends to be irregular. It tends to be unpredictable as well. So it can vary in unpredictability in volume and frequency. And it can be unwanted as well. So it can disrupt concentration, relaxation, sleep, anything like that, right? So these things are characteristics of noise. Noise tends to have a high intensity, right? That with prolonged exposure can damage the air. So for example, examples of noise could be construction sounds, car horns, traffic, industrial machinery, loud music and speakers at unwanted times, right? So stuff like that. From an acoustic perspective now, noise is usually characterized by irregular sound waves, whereas other waves like music tend to be more structured and predictable. Remember when we start harmonics and we see that we have different levels of waves, or different levels of harmonics, right? Music and speech tend to have structured waves, while noise tends to have irregular waves, right? So looking at stuff like that. The summary, right, of subjective qualities of noise and loudness, right? There's a really summary that I just put here, right? So it's unwanted, unpredictable, and disturbing. Where loudness is perceived as intensity, right? And this is perceived logarithmically, right, by the air. So stuff like that I want you guys to remember. For this part of module 2, it's really and truly remembering concepts and explanations more so than mathematics. Alright? So this is where your reading comes in, where you need to read from multiple textbooks and then use the different studying methods to just remember this information. Shouldn't be a lot. All right. So loudness now, right? So loudness is also somewhat subjective, right? But loudness really refers to the perceived intensity or volume of a sound, right? So sound intensity is important for loudness. So the intensity increases. So as intensity increases, so does the loudness of a sound. And due to the logarithmic nature of the decibel scale, right, an increased intensity by 10 decibels corresponds to doubling the loudness, right? So things can get loud pretty quickly, right? So we have stuff like that. So that's what's important for survival as well in her early human evolution, right? Sound being interpreted logarithmically, right? So as something gets closer and closer to you, it gets progressively louder and louder on a logarithmic scale, right? So we can tell when things are getting closer or when things are getting further away, right? With this as well, if you're hearing like a helicopter passing or a plane passing overhead, right, you should be able to look at that object, right, or look at a car, for example, coming closer to you, and focus on how loud it gets coming closer to you, and how loud it gets as it goes away from you, right? So be mindful of these things when we speak about the physics of the air, right? The frequency as well for would be usually in the more sensitive range, right? So we're looking at that. So the human ear, we know that the most sensitive range is between 1 kilohertz and 5 kilohertz, right? So we're looking at the frequency. So the perceived loudness also depends on the frequency of the sound as well, right? So the frequency can be a very low frequency humming sound, right? That can be perceived as louder, right, to some persons than a high frequency or high pitched sound. The duration as well, right? So prolonged exposure to loud sounds can cause fatigue, right, and can now alter the perception of loudness, right? So what are we saying? If you listen to, if you can try this, you could listen to your music at a certain volume for like 15 minutes, right? It will be loud at first, but after a while, the perception of loudness to the ear will be gone. Unless you know change the intensity of the sound now, then you will perceive loudness, right? So if you increase the volume of music, it will seem loud at the time, but after a period of time being exposed to that intensity of sound, right, you will no longer be phased by it unless you change the intensity. Are you guys understanding what I'm saying? It's like you're going to a party and the party is very loud, but after you've been at the party for a while, it's kind of regular, right? So you could look at that, right? So the psychological factor as well, individuals' hearing sensitivity, attention, expectations can also affect the perception of loudness. For example, sounds heard in a quiet environment may seem louder. So at night, when you go and turn on the microwave because I didn't eat dinner, the microwave is around 10 million times louder at night, right? When I drop a coin, it's very much louder when it's in a quiet place. So that's a psychological factor there. So things tend to sound way louder when you're in a quiet environment, and things tend to sound less louder when you're in a noisy environment, right? It is the same loudness, right? But it would be perceived differently. And in the loudness level now, it's quantitatively described as using the Fawn scale, right? So which reflects how loud a sound is perceived by human ear at different frequencies, or by the human ear at different frequencies. So the Fawn scale is based on subjective tests where listeners match the loudness of pure tones at various frequencies to a reference tone, right? So we can use a Fawn scale to determine perception of human loudness, right? But really and truly, that is where we come to an end of module 2. All right, so that brings us to the end there.